of Proximus Next. We will be sharing our findings in 5 chapters. First, we'll discover how frequent cyber attacks occur. Then we'll go into the impact of cyber attacks. And then we'll be looking at the maturity of organizations dealing with these attacks. In the 4th chapter, we'll dive into the means organizations have at their disposal in terms of human and financial assets. And then finally, we'll be glimpsing at the future, looking at the weeks, months, and years to come and how cyber programs are run. Good afternoon, my name is Wouter van den Bussen. I'm leading the cybersecurity solutions team at Proximus Next, and join me in navigating the cybersecurity landscape. But one more thing before we start. You have all that black brick in your pocket. It's time to give it some attention. During the session, we'll be aggregating our collective experiences, and we'll ask some questions. No stress, if you haven't scanned the code yet, we'll be repeating it throughout the presentation. So, our survey is conducted over Belgium and Luxembourg, and we questioned 150 cyber professionals across all sectors, all verticals, and all sizes of companies. The survey we executed in the last quarter of 23 and the 1st quarter of this year. And I'm proud, this is already our 5th annual survey. So we can show some trends over time. Where relevant, we'll be sharing the insights split on organization size, and also indicate trends over time. When we split data between SMBs and large enterprises, we put a cutoff at 250 employees, and we indicate years is the year in which we started the survey. So for this year, you see 2023 in the results. So our first chapter is about cyber incidents. Let's discover how often they occur. But before showing the results, let's try out the Menti quiz. So take your smartphones and either scan the QR code or go to menti.com, type in the 7 digits you see on the screen here. And as you will notice throughout the presentation, the questions we are asking are your personal views and experiences. There is no right or wrong most of the time. And this first question is pretty straightforward. Did you yourself experience a cyber attack, either in your own environment or in your customer's environment? We put 3 possible answers forward. Yes, serious attacks. No, only minor attacks. Or no, I did not experience a cyber attack at all in the past 12 months. Give you a couple of seconds to reply. I notice I'm here with experienced cyber incident handlers. For me personally, it's also clearly a yes. For sure, many of the organizations we work with reached out to us to aid them in cyber attacks. Our CSR teams had to roll out regularly, unfortunately. So the first conclusion of our survey is that about 1 in 3 organizations have had an attack, or reported an attack in the past 12 months. 30% to be more precise. We do note that about a third of the organizations that did not report an attack also had shown pretty low confidence in their detection capabilities. The structural occurrence of cyber incidents shouldn't come as a surprise. The IMF dedicated a full chapter in their Global Financial Stability Report of last month to the growing concerns of cyber incidents. In their study, they claim a doubling of incidents since COVID. If you look deeper at this data and the data across segments, we see clearly that larger organizations tend to be more victim of cyber attacks than smaller ones. About 1 in 6 of the small organizations have claimed to have had an attack, while almost half of the larger organization had an attack. Larger organizations obviously have a larger footprint. They have a larger attack surface, and with a larger number of external employees and in general more risks, they are more vulnerable. Additionally, worth noting is the evolution over time. We added the results of the past 2 years, and actually it's relatively stable. And there's no significant differences if you look at the subsegments. It's worth noting that about 1 in 3 companies over the past years have had an incident. Now that we've seen the occurrence of cyber incidents, let's investigate the impact those incidents had on the environment of organizations. and which assets are impacted the most. But before diving into this chapter, use your first, second, or third form of authentication, dive into your smartphone, and let's answer this second question. This time, we are asking you which of the following threats worries you the most? Is it the increasing number of high-severity vulnerabilities, the use of generative AI in social engineering attacks, or maybe the heightened tensions due to involvement of international state actors? Give you a couple of seconds. We already have some answers in. We're going for an interesting split here. I think all new threats are quite interesting. For me personally, I'm most worried about the use of generative AI in social engineering attacks. Seeing the accelerated adoption of generative AI technology in generating deepfakes, not only in text, but also in audio, video, and targeted spear phishing, it really makes me wonder what the notion of trust will be in the months and years to come. So for those organizations that were impacted by a cyber incident, consequences can be quite severe. Headlines are never far away, and in our survey, about half of the correspondents that had an incident claimed to have had a loss of productivity in half of the cases, and in half of the cases even direct costs related to the incidents, either to resolve the incident or to pay ransomware. And about 1 in 6 even reported reputational damage, while about a third did not have any damages due to the incident. Looking at the 2024 DBIR, Data Breach Investigation Report of Horizon, we can learn that about in 62% of the financially motivated incidents, ransomware or extortion was at the base, and those incidents incurred a median cost of 40,000 euros. If you look at the assets of the organizations that are impacted the most, and we look primarily at the physical assets, we see that end-user devices are by far the most impacted devices. As many of you might know, a first entry into an attack is typically the end user or compromise of the end user device, and then moving along laterally to other parts of the organization. And there we see also 1 in 4 of the organizations reported impact on their network assets or server assets. If we, on the other hand, look at the digital and the data impact of cyber incidents, we see that most attacks really focus at customer data on the one hand, and the other hand, operational data. They really try to hurt where the companies feel it most. So in this third chapter, we'll further elaborate on the maturity of cyber organizations and how they are dealing with incidents and the threats thereof. In this Menti quiz, we are looking at a fictitious incident. We're sketching a pretty concise situation about a possible cyber attack. On a sunny or potentially rainy afternoon, like today, your detection tools flag dubious login activities and file activity on a critical production environment. What would you initiate first? Would you isolate the production environment from the rest of the network? Would you first look at involving an external incident response team? Or would you go into an analysis phase and look at the production logs of the past weeks and months to identify anomalies? Yeah, this question is obviously a tricky one. Isolating a production environment reduces the risk, obviously, of containment and propagation in the network, but it could have very serious operational consequences. Involving an external team early on might be overkill if it's a false flag, and analyzing weeks of logs could be time-consuming and delays containment of the incident. Managing a cyber program from a risk and maturity point of view is really gaining ground. Not only has it been shown that higher mature organizations have less impact of an incident, showing maturity has become mandatory for many. With NIS2 regulation coming effective later this year in October, thousands of Belgian organizations will have to show maturity in cyber. and adhere to a minimal level of maturity. In the NIST CSF framework, which is often used as a basis for cybersecurity programs, we detect 5 functions. I know in the latest version, there's even a governance function added. And also the Cyber Fundamentals framework relies heavily on this NIST CSF framework. We questioned our respondents on their perceived maturity on these 5 functions. And we clearly see that organizations perceive their capabilities on prevent and detect as significantly higher compared to predict, respond, and recover. If you look at more detail into this figure, we see this gap quite clearly on this graph. We separated out the small and medium enterprises from the large enterprises, as it is quite clear that medium enterprises show lower maturity in all of these 5 functions compared to large enterprises, specifically on the predict and the recover phase, response phase. We also questioned them on the stages of responding to incidents. Now we questioned on the 5 steps of incident response, and respondents clearly see themselves more ready to attack the contain and the recover phase, while communication is clearly showing less confidence in their strategy. Next, let's review the readiness of organizations to close those maturity gaps and run cyber programs. For this quiz, as it's obviously about skills, we are looking at which specific profiles you had most difficulties to recruit in the past year, or if you're not in a recruitment role, which you think are most difficult to recruit in the market. We picked out 3 particular interesting profiles. Would you think it's a security analyst running your security operations center, an information security officer steering your program and doing GRC activities, or would it be a specific technical knowledge in the domain of, for example, operation technology or cyber physical systems? I'm very curious for this one. Ooh, you agree with me. It's also my perception. The recruitment of OT or CPS specialist was most difficult for us as well, to find reliable people with good experience in cyber. So when we ask about the shortage of specialized people in security departments, more than half of the respondents claim to have a shortage, 54% to be more precise. And this shortage is also well illustrated by Agoria in their socioeconomic study on the cyber sector in Belgium, where they claim to have 1,200 vacancies on a sector of 6,000 people in Belgium. The vacancy rate of 16%, which is higher than the 9% in IT and 5% overall in economy. And we see that this shortage is also significantly higher compared to last year's study. In the large organizations, almost 2/3 of the companies flags a shortage in staff, about up from half last year. Also in the medium enterprises, we see almost half of the companies agreeing with a staff shortage. When asked about the intent or the way they want to close this shortage, many still are looking at recruitment or finding specialized consultants to fill in more permanent roles in the organization. But more notably, 42% of the respondents want to outsource more security processes to service providers. This is valid in both the enterprise and the SMB segment. In our final chapter of the survey results, we're looking at how security professionals see the security program evolving in the years to come. And as we are all here with security professionals, let's ask the question to you. Which of the following 3 priorities would you personally rank highest in your program? Is it about experimenting with AI to augment your security controls? Prioritizing the definition of a data and identity strategy? Or is it about revising architectures on your core network security components, for example, by introducing SSE or SASE technologies? Interesting. We know this is not a fully fair comparison, and it obviously all depends on your organization. We see currently customers actively evaluating their security blueprint. and more focused on cloud-delivered applications, on a data-centric approach, and they're clearly going to kind of a zero-trust strategy on this. And some approach it more from a data and identity point of view, while others start with the re-architecting of networks. While AI is clearly top of mind for many, we've seen only very few customers actually experimenting with AI beyond the application of machine learning on their security controls. So back to the survey. First of all, it's quite clear that the overall pressure on IT budget is not reflected in the cyber domain. We see that about 20% of the respondents claim that their budget will increase with at least a fifth. And severe shrink of the budgets is quite rare. This global trend is also noticeable by IDC in their predictions for this year. They claim that there will be a strong double-digit growth in the European market on cyber controls of 12%. On the priorities for the program of this year, we synthesized an open question in the survey, and we distilled 4 key priorities overall. The first priority, there's no particular order to these priorities, we clustered them in 4 groups. The first priority focuses on operational readiness, having processes in place to manage assets, vulnerabilities, and look at the overall state of your security environment is clearly top of mind. Many organizations clearly realize the importance of a broad cyber knowledge in organizations. Trainings and awarenesses are embedded in security programs everywhere. Thirdly, a risk and compliance approach to a cybersecurity program is clearly gaining ground. It shouldn't come as a surprise with the increased regulatory pressure. And lastly, many organizations are putting specific cyber measure projects or even programs in place to deal with shortcomings. And we noticed there a lot of focus on EDR, XDR technologies, and also the continued focus on privacy. So to summarize the findings of our survey, we are putting forward 5 key takeaways. Organizations continue to suffer from cyber incidents. 1/3 of the organizations reported an incident in the past 12 months. The impact of those incidents is also very material, going from loss of productivity to actual cash out to handle those incidents. And if we then look at the maturity of those organizations, we see that they clearly have more confidence in their prevent and detect capabilities over the identify, respond, and recover functions. Staffing the teams improves to be an increasingly tough challenge, with over half of the respondents claiming to have a shortage in cyber teams. Budgets, on the other hand, seem to be quite stable and increasing structurally as well. And organizations are actively looking to outsource to our service providers. At Proximus Next, we take the learnings from these reports and many interactions with our customers at heart. And we've distilled 3 verbs that characterize our managed security service stack. The audio? So Proximus Next could be your trusted advisor in cybersecurity services. We made the characteristics of our managed service stack explicit with 3 verbs. Cybersecurity processes, tools, and people must work as one. It must be an integrated architecture that is reliable and resilient. You have to orchestrate it. Running a cyber defense strategy must be proactive in nature, tackling new risks, dealing with emerging threats, and resolving incidents. Remediate it. And a cyber program must be a journey, continuously improving your cyber defenses and become more cyber resilient. Bolster it. Those 3 action verbs form the foundation of our managed security service stack. We've called our stack Orbit. Let me conclude this session with a pointer to our extensive survey results. This year, we published the survey in an easily digestible online report. Feel free to scan the QR code or go to the link shown here. And there are many data points and conclusions in the report that we couldn't cover during today's session. We also have a very shiny cubic stand at the entrance, C3. C2, feel free to drop by. There are 4 interesting sub-corners in our stand on quantum-safe compute, on unified cloud management, on data resilience, and obviously, if you want more details on our managed security stack, we're there to give you more data. And if those reasons aren't good enough for you, I was told there are goodies to be grabbed, Lego sets to be won, and even ice creams available at 3 o'clock today. Thanks for spending the time with us today, and looking forward to continue the conversation.